Most people never stop to wonder why learning new things takes so long. We spend hours reading, highlighting, and copying notes, but the information just doesn't stick. It's easy to start thinking that being a slow learner is just part of who we are. For years, I felt the same way, but I eventually learned that speed isn't something you're born with. It's something you can build by changing how you study. This book is a guide for anyone who's frustrated by slow progress, tired of feeling stuck, or worried they just don't have the right brain for fast learning. I wrote it because I wanted to break the myth that learning quickly is only for a lucky few. The truth is, anyone can learn faster if they use the right methods. Inside, you'll find simple, practical techniques that actually work. You'll learn why struggling to remember something is a good sign, not a bad one. You'll see why old habits like rereading and highlighting don't work, and what to do instead. The book will show you step by step how to study in a way that makes information stay in your memory and lets you use it when you need it, whether for a test, a new job, or just to keep up in a fast-moving world. If you've ever read something 3 times and still forgotten it, or if you felt like learning new skills is just too hard, this book is for you. You don't have to spend more hours, you just have to spend them differently. By the end, you'll have a set of tools you can use to learn anything faster and better than you thought possible. You don't need to be a genius, you just need to know how to practice in the right way. The ideas in this book are easy to understand and ready for you to try right now. If you're ready to leave slow, frustrating study habits behind and discover how fast you can really learn, let's get started. Chapter 1: Breaking Slow. Everything you know about your own intelligence is likely wrong. You have spent years, perhaps decades, telling yourself a specific story about your brain. The story goes like this. Some people are naturally gifted sponges who absorb information effortlessly, and you are simply not one of them. You believe that learning is a fixed trait, like your height or your eye color. You believe that when you struggle to understand a complex concept or fail to recall a fact during an exam, it is proof of a hardware limitation. You tell yourself you are just slow. This is a lie. It is a comfortable lie because it absolves you of responsibility, but it is a lie nonetheless. The truth is far more uncomfortable, but infinitely more liberating. You are not slow. You are just using methods that are scientifically designed to waste your time. If you were to try to cut down a massive oak tree using a plastic butter knife, you would spend weeks hacking away at the bark. You would be exhausted. You would be sweating. You would be putting in maximum effort, and you would make almost zero progress. If someone walked by and saw you, they wouldn't say you were weak. They would say you were using the wrong tool. Yet, when it comes to learning, you are likely hacking at the tree with a butter knife and blaming your muscles. This chapter is your wake-up call. We are going to rip apart the "I'm just a slow learner" identity. We are going to look at the fake productivity rituals you have been sold, the rereading, the highlighting, the endless note copying, and expose them for what they are: sedatives that make you feel like you are working while your brain remains entirely dormant. The problem isn't your brain. The problem is your system. And unlike your genetics, your system is something you can fix today. The illusion of competence. Let's look at your current reality. You sit down to study. You open the textbook or the lecture slides. You have your highlighters arranged in a neat row. You start reading. As you read, you highlight the important parts. You might even copy those parts into a notebook, perhaps color-coding them. You read the chapter again. You feel good. You feel productive. The material feels familiar. You recognize the words on the page. You tell yourself, "I know this." Then, 48 hours later, you sit for a test or try to explain the concept to a colleague, and your mind goes blank. You grasp for the information, but it's gone. You feel that familiar flush of panic and shame. You think, "I studied for 5 hours. Why am I so stupid?" You are not stupid. You fell victim to the illusion of competence. When you reread a text or highlight a sentence, you are creating fluency, not memory. Fluency is the feeling that information is easy to process because it is right in front of you. Your brain recognizes the visual pattern of the words, so it assumes it has mastered the concept. But recognition is not recall. You were painting over the same spot on a wall with water. It looked wet and changed for a moment, but as soon as you looked away, it dried up and vanished. These low-yield habits are dangerous because they mimic work. They burn time, they burn energy, they keep you up late, but they do not force the brain to change. Learning is a biological process. It requires neurons to forge new connections. That only happens when the brain is forced to work, to struggle, to retrieve. Passive consumption creates zero structural change in the brain. You have been paying a massive time tax, trading hours of your life for an illusion of progress. The compound interest of inefficiency. If you do not fix this now, the cost will be catastrophic. This is not just about getting a bad grade on next week's exam or feeling awkward in a meeting. This is about the trajectory of your entire life. Think about the fast learners you know, the peers who seem to study half as much as you but consistently outperform you. You hate them a little bit, don't you? You assume they are mutants. But what if they just stumbled upon a better operating system earlier than you did? Here is the terrifying math of learning speed. If your method is slow and porous, meaning you forget 80% of what you study within 2 days, you have to constantly relearn the basics. You are forever running on a treadmill, sweating to stay in the same place. Meanwhile, the efficient learner retains the basics on the first pass. When they move to advanced topics, they are building on a solid foundation. You are trying to build a skyscraper on a swamp. Over 5 or 10 years, this gap widens into a canyon. The efficient learner accumulates a massive library of mental models and skills. They take on harder projects. They get promoted. They switch careers with confidence. You, however, start to shrink. You begin to avoid difficult subjects. You drop the hard major. You stay in the easy job because you are terrified of the learning curve in a new role. You start saying no to opportunities because you don't trust your brain to keep up. This is the downward spiral of avoidance. It starts with inefficient study habits, leads to poor performance, calcifies into a belief that you are not smart enough, and ends with you settling for a life that is far smaller than your potential. You owe it to your future self to stop this spiral right now. The promise of the upgrade. The good news is that because your problem is mechanical, the solution is mechanical. Learning is a skill, not a gift. It is a trainable capacity, just like lifting weights or playing the piano. If you change the inputs, you change the outputs. By the time you finish this book, you will have replaced your butter knife with a chainsaw. You are going to build a personalized speed study system. You will stop asking, how long should I study, and start asking, how deep can I process? You will shift from being a passive collector of information to an active architect of knowledge. Imagine a different future. Imagine sitting down to learn a new software, a new language, or a complex legal framework. Instead of anxiety, you feel a calm, predatory focus. You know exactly how to break the material down. You know how to feed it into your brain so it sticks. You know that if you put in 2 hours of work, you will get 2 hours of retention. This is the state of the method-first learner. When you walk into an exam room or a boardroom, you aren't hoping you get lucky. You have the quiet confidence of a professional who has done the reps. You know you can learn anything fast. This belief changes everything. It allows you to take risks. It allows you to pivot. It gives you an unfair advantage in a world where most people are still highlighting textbooks and hoping for the best. The architecture of speed. To get there, we are going to dismantle your current habits and rebuild them from the ground up. This book is structured to take you through a specific sequence of upgrades. We do not start with tips and tricks. We start with the engine. First, we will tackle the method upgrade. We will audit your current behaviors and ruthlessly eliminate the fake productivity that is stealing your time. We will replace passive review with high-yield operations. Next, we will reframe your relationship with effort in hard equals fast. You will learn why the easy way is the slow way and how to find the stretch zone where human potential actually expands. We will teach you to stop fearing confusion and start using it as a signal. Then, we will install the recall engine and deep processing. These are the heavy lifters. You will learn to stop trying to put information in and start practicing getting information out. You will learn to manipulate and connect ideas rather than just collecting them. Finally, we will layer on the timing advantage and mental models. You will learn to leverage the spacing effect to hack the forgetting curve and how to chunk information so you can absorb massive complexity at speed. We follow this order for a reason. There is no point in optimizing the timing of your study sessions if your core method is broken. There is no point in trying to build mental models if you are too afraid of the difficulty required to construct them. We are building a machine, piece by piece. The winner's decision. There is a distinct difference between the attitude of a winner and a loser when it comes to learning. The loser defends their old story. They cling to their excuses. They say, "But I like highlighting, it relaxes me." They say, "I'm just a visual learner, I can't do recall." They view their struggle as a badge of honor, confusing suffering with progress. They want to be saved without having to change. The winner treats their brain like a laboratory. They are ruthless about results. If a method doesn't result in retention, they kill it, no matter how comfortable it feels. The winner understands that the goal is not to study hard. The goal is to learn fast. They are willing to endure the temporary discomfort of new methods for the permanent power of superior speed. You are standing at a decision point. You can close this book and go back to your highlighters and your late-night cramming sessions. You can continue to tell yourself the story that you are just naturally slow. It is a safe path. It demands nothing of you but your potential. Or you can draw a line in the sand. You can decide that you are done playing small. You can decide that your brain is capable of illegal speeds, provided you give it the right instructions. You can decide that from this moment on, you are no longer a slow learner. You are just an untrained one. The choice is yours. But if you are ready to stop pretending to work and start actually generating speed, you need to look at the specific mechanics of what you're doing wrong. We need to open up the hood of your daily routine and see exactly which parts are broken. The first step isn't to work harder. It is to audit the system. And what we find in the next chapter might just shock you. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Grow to the Top and activate notifications to receive more self-improvement tips that will supercharge your growth. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you for your support. Chapter 2, Method Upgrade. You are working too hard for too little return. That is the brutal reality of your current situation. You sit in the library or at your desk until your eyes burn, you forego sleep, and you decline social invitations, all in the service of feeding your brain. Yet, when the moment of truth arrives, the exam, the presentation, the critical project, you find yourself hesitating. The information that felt so solid the night before has evaporated like mist. You are left wondering if there is a leak in your mind. There is no leak. You are simply pouring water into a bucket that has no bottom. Most people believe that the gap between them and the top performers is a matter of raw horsepower. They think the smart kids or the high-potential employees simply have faster processors in their skulls. This belief is a trap because it convinces you that your ceiling is fixed. It tells you that to get better results, you must simply suffer more, put in more hours, drink more coffee, and grind your gears until they strip. But learning speed is not a function of how many hours you log. It is a function of the operations you run in your mind while you are logging them. If you spend 6 hours running a low-quality mental operation, you will get less done than someone who spends 90 minutes running a high-quality one. This chapter is about swapping out your engine. We are going to stop looking at what you are learning and start ruthlessly optimizing how you are learning. We are going to turn you from a passive consumer of information into the architect of your own genius. The engineer's mindset. You need to understand that you are the engineer of your own learning process. Most people never consciously design a study method, they just inherit one. You likely study the way you do because you saw someone else doing it, or because a teacher in fourth grade told you to copy definitions from the board. You have been running the same software for years without ever checking if it actually works. Changing your methods is the single most effective lever you can pull to increase your speed. It can double or triple your retention rates without you needing to gain a single IQ point. Think of it like a lever in physics. If you push on the wrong spot, you can strain with all your might and move nothing. If you find the fulcrum and push on the right spot, heavy objects move with ease. Your method is that fulcrum. Consider two students preparing for the same difficult biology exam. Student A spends 6 hours reading the textbook, highlighting key terms and rereading their notes. They feel exhausted and virtuous. Student B spends 2 hours. They do not open the textbook to read. They open it only to check answers. They spend their time trying to draw diagrams from memory and explaining the concepts out loud to an empty room. On the test, Student A recognizes the words but cannot connect them. Student B, who spent 1/3 of the time, crushes the exam. Student A looks at Student B and thinks they are just naturally smart. But Student A is wrong. Student B just used a better lever. Student B focused on output, while Student A focused on input. When you finally accept that your routine is a system you can redesign, you get an immediate emotional payoff: relief. The anxiety that plagues you before big events usually comes from a lack of control. You don't know if you're ready, so you panic. A clear, engineered method destroys that anxiety. It gives you a predictable path. You stop hoping you learned enough and start knowing you did, because your system provides the proof. The fluency trap. To rebuild your system, you first have to identify the rot in your current one. We need to distinguish between two types of study habits: passive and active. Passive methods are the ones that feel good. They include rereading chapters, copying notes verbatim, watching lecture videos without pausing, and making your summaries look pretty with 3 different colors of ink. Active methods are the ones that feel like work. They include trying to recall a fact without looking, solving problems you haven't seen before, and teaching a concept to yourself without looking at the source material. The reason you likely gravitate toward passive methods is a psychological phenomenon called fluency bias. This is the single biggest enemy of speed learning. When you read a sentence for the second time, your brain processes it faster than the first time. This ease of processing feels like mastery. You read a paragraph and your brain says, "Oh yeah, I know this." You nod along, you feel safe. But fluency is a liar. Recognizing information is not the same as knowing it. Recognition requires a trigger, the book in front of you. True knowledge requires retrieval, the ability to pull the information out of the dark on command. Passive methods create the illusion of competence. They trick you into stopping your study session too early because you feel ready. Then, when the book is taken away during the test, the illusion collapses. You need to build a method stack. This is not a single magic trick, but a combination of active techniques that you use to attack different types of information. A stack might include one method for memorizing terms, another for understanding systems, and a third for practicing essays. The goal is to move away from the one-size-fits-all approach of rereading and toward a surgical, customized toolkit. Shattering the myths of effort. Before we install the new methods, we have to delete the old beliefs that are clogging up your hard drive. The most pervasive myth is that more hours fix everything. This is the brute force approach to learning. If you're getting a C, you think you need to study twice as long to get an A. But if your method is flawed, doubling your time just doubles your exhaustion. It leads to burnout, not breakthroughs. Better hours beat more hours every time. The second myth is that if it feels easy, it is working. We are conditioned to seek comfort. We want our study sessions to feel smooth and rhythmic. But in the realm of learning, ease is often a sign of stagnation. If you are breezing through your review, you are likely not challenging your memory or your understanding. Real tests never feel like relaxed rereading. They feel like pressure. If you want to be fast, you have to stop using ease as a metric for success and start viewing discomfort as a signal of productive learning. The third myth is that smart people don't need methods. You might look at top performers, the surgeons, the grandmasters, the valedictorians, and imagine they just wake up and know things. This is a fantasy. If you dig into the lives of elite performers, you find they are the most obsessive about their methods. They have rituals, systems, and coaches. They do not rely on raw talent, they rely on process. Method is a force multiplier. It makes the average learner good and the good learner dangerous. The great method swap. Now we move to the practical execution. You cannot change everything overnight, or you will quit. Instead, we're going to perform a systematic audit and a gradual swap. First, conduct a method audit. The next time you sit down to work, watch yourself like a hawk. Write down exactly what you do, minute by minute. Do you open the book and start reading from page 1? Do you highlight? Do you scroll through slides? Write it all down. Then, next to each action, label it, passive or active. Be honest. If you are just moving your eyes over words, it is passive. If you are copying a definition, it is passive. You will likely find that 80% or more of your time is spent on passive tasks. Do not judge yourself. Just observe the data. This is why you feel slow. You are spending most of your energy on activities that do not result in retention. Your mission is to replace one low-yield habit per week. Do not try to overhaul your entire life on a Tuesday. Pick your single worst offender. For most people, this is rereading. For the next 7 days, ban yourself from rereading chapters as a primary study tool. Replace it with a high-yield method, such as practice questions or recall summaries. Keep this change for a week. The final step in this phase is to change your metric. Stop tracking time. Nobody cares how many hours you sat in the chair. The only thing that matters is what stuck. After every session, spend 3 minutes writing down everything you remember without looking at your notes. This is your reality check. Compare the time spent against the amount recalled. You will quickly see that 20 minutes of active struggle produces more ink on the page than 2 hours of passive reading. Use this data to ruthlessly cut methods that don't pay rent. Tactical interventions. To keep yourself on track, you need guardrails. The first is the recall first rule. Most people start by consuming. They open the book and let the information wash over them. You will do the opposite. Before you consume a single word of new information, ask yourself, what do I remember from last time? Force your brain to boot up and retrieve the file before you try to edit it. This simple switch trains your brain to treat recall as the default mode, not an afterthought. Second, set method alarms. It is easy to drift back into passive habits because they are comfortable. You start out testing yourself, but 20 minutes later, you find yourself mindlessly highlighting again. Set a timer on your phone for every 20 or 30 minutes. When it goes off, ask yourself, am I thinking or am I just copying? If you are just copying, stand up, shake it off, and switch immediately to an active method. Third, create your go-to 3. Decision fatigue is real. When you are tired and the material is hard, you don't want to have to invent a strategy. You need a default setting. Choose 3 active methods that you like best. Perhaps flash questions, teaching out loud, and doing past papers. Whenever you feel lost, unfocused, or overwhelmed, deploy one of your go-to 3. It prevents you from defaulting back to the warm embrace of passive reading. The new identity. As you implement these changes, you will notice a shift in your outcomes. The first phase is simply cleaner sessions. You will eliminate the obvious time wasters. You will finish a study block and know exactly what you accomplished. You won't have that vague, foggy feeling of, I think I studied. You will have a list of concepts you wrestled with and conquered. The second phase is predictable performance. This is the holy grail. When you rely on passive methods, your exam results are a lottery. You hope the questions match what you remember. When you use active methods, you know what you know. You can predict your score before you walk into the room because you have already tested yourself on the material a dozen times. You trade hope for data. Ultimately, this leads to an identity shift. You stop seeing yourself as a struggler. You start identifying as someone who optimizes. You become a method master. This identity is portable. It doesn't matter if you're learning biochemistry, contract law, or how to code in Python. You carry your method stack with you. You walk into new challenges with a smirk because you know you have a system that works. Pitfalls and traps. There are ways to mess this up. The most common mistake is overcomplicating the system. You get excited and design a 12-step ritual involving 4 different apps and a color-coded spreadsheet. You will do this for 3 days and then quit. Complexity is the enemy of execution. Simple and consistent beats complex and abandoned every time. Strip your stack back to the 2 or 3 core methods that deliver the highest yield. Another trap is emotional attachment to old habits. You might love your highlighters. They might make you feel artistic and organized. Giving them up can feel like losing a security blanket. It is okay to keep a small comfort slot in your routine, maybe the last 10 minutes of the day, where you can do the passive things that relax you. But do not confuse this with learning. It is relaxation. Treat it as a reward, not the work. Finally, the biggest pitfall is not measuring anything. If you swap methods but never check if they are working, you are just guessing. You must have a feedback loop. The metric is always the same. What can I explain cold from memory after 48 hours? If a method doesn't improve that number, fire it. You are the CEO of your own brain, and you need to be ruthless with underperforming employees. The warning. You now have the blueprints for the machine. You understand that your old way of working was a mirage, and you have the tools to build something real. But I have to warn you about what comes next. When you switch from passive to active methods, something unpleasant is going to happen. It is going to feel harder. Much harder. Your brain is going to protest. It's going to try to convince you to go back to the easy way. You might even feel like you are learning slower because you are struggling to recall answers instead of just smoothly reading them. This feeling of strain is not a sign that you are failing. It is a sign that the system is finally working. You have moved from the passenger seat to the driver's seat, and now you can feel the road. But simply knowing how to upgrade your method isn't enough. You need to know how to handle the friction that comes with it. You need to understand why the struggle is the very thing that creates the speed. In the next chapter, we are going to explore the counterintuitive physics of the mind. We are going to look at why the things you have been avoiding, the confusion, the strain, the mental fatigue, are actually the raw fuel for illegal learning speed. It turns out that if you want to go fast, you have to be willing to make it hurt. Chapter 3, Hard equals fast. Your brain is screaming at you to stop. You are staring at a complex diagram or a wall of text that makes absolutely no sense, and you feel a physical urge to look away. Your hand twitches toward your phone. You suddenly remember you need to clean your room or check your email. A voice in your head whispers that you are not smart enough to understand this, that you should switch to an easier topic, or that you should just take a break and try again tomorrow. This specific moment, the moment of maximum confusion and frustration, is the most important moment of your entire learning life. Most people retreat here. They close the book or switch to a passive activity like highlighting, which feels productive but is actually just a way to soothe their anxiety. They interpret the struggle as a red flag, a warning sign that they have hit their limit. But they are reading the signal backward. That feeling of mental strain is not a stop sign. It is a green light. It is the distinct sensation of your brain upgrading itself. If you want to learn at speeds that seem unfair to everyone else, you have to fundamentally change your relationship with difficulty. You have to stop viewing struggle as a failure and start viewing it as the fuel. The central premise of this chapter is simple but counterintuitive. If it feels easy, you are learning slowly. If it feels hard, you are learning fast. The sweat of the mind. Think about how a muscle grows. You do not build strength by lifting a styrofoam cup 500 times. You build strength by lifting a weight that is right at the edge of your capacity, a weight that makes your fibers tremble and burn. That burn is the signal that the body needs to adapt. Your brain operates on a nearly identical principle. Neuroplasticity, the rewiring of neural connections, is triggered by demand. When you breeze through a chapter, nodding along because you recognize the keywords, there is no demand. You are lifting the styrofoam cup. Your brain has no reason to restructure itself because the current structure is handling the task just fine. However, when you confront a concept that you cannot grasp, or when you try to solve a problem that fights back, you create a gap between what your brain can do and what it needs to do. That gap is where the magic happens. The mental discomfort you feel is the cognitive equivalent of sweat. It is evidence that you are operating at the limit of your current ability, which is the only place where speed is generated. The problem is that we are biologically wired to conserve energy. Your brain wants to drift toward the path of least resistance. When you are stressed or tired, you will naturally gravitate toward easy tasks, organizing your notes, rewriting definitions, or watching videos on 2x speed. These activities lower your anxiety because they are comfortable, but they are the enemies of speed. By chasing comfort, you are training yourself to be unprepared for the reality of the exam or the project, which will not be comfortable. You must develop the emotional toughness to stay in the pocket of difficulty when every instinct tells you to run. The Goldilocks zone of pain. We need to be precise about what kind of difficulty we are talking about. Not all struggle is created equal. If you try to learn advanced quantum mechanics before you know basic algebra, you will not learn fast. You will just cry. That is not productive struggle. That is chaos. We are aiming for desirable difficulty. This is a concept from cognitive psychology that describes a level of challenge that is hard but solvable with significant effort. It is the sweet spot. Imagine a spectrum of 3 zones. On the left, you have the comfort zone. This is where you know everything. You get every answer right immediately, and you feel great. Learning speed here is near 0. On the far right, you have the panic zone. This is where the material is so far above your head that your brain shuts down in self-defense. Learning speed here is also 0. In the middle lies the stretch zone. This is where the work is difficult. You get answers wrong. You have to stop and think for minutes at a time. You feel clumsy. This is the zone of high-speed adaptation. Your goal is to engineer your study sessions so that you spend almost all your time in the stretch zone. This relates directly to cognitive load, which is the amount of information your working memory can hold at one time. If the load is too low, you are bored. If it is too high, you are overwhelmed. You have to manage this load carefully. If a task pushes you into the panic zone, you don't quit, you simplify. You break the complex problem into 2 smaller parts to bring the difficulty back down into the stretch zone. You are constantly adjusting the dials to keep yourself in that uncomfortable, high-growth middle ground. The lies your brain tells you. To live in the stretch zone, you have to stop believing the myths your insecurity whispers to you. The most dangerous myth is the idea that if I really understood this, it would feel easy. This is false. Early understanding is almost always messy. It is fragmented and slow. Fluency, that feeling of effortless competence, is the final result of learning, not the process of it. Expecting the beginning of the process to feel like the end is a recipe for quitting. Difficulty is simply the price you pay now for ease later. Another lie is that struggle is an identity issue. You hit a hard problem and think, I'm not cut out for this. You look at high achievers and assume they glide through complex topics. You don't see them staring at a wall for an hour, wrestling with a single concept. You don't see the frustration. You only see the result. You must separate your identity from your momentary performance. Struggling with a concept doesn't mean you are dumb. It means you are not yet fluent. It means you need more reps in the stretch zone. Finally, you must reject the myth that good study sessions are calm and comfortable. We have a cultural image of the good student sitting peacefully with a cup of tea, smiling at a book. Real high-speed learning looks more like a mental wrestling match. It involves frustration, confusion, and mental fatigue. If you finish a study session feeling fresh and relaxed, you probably didn't push hard enough. You should feel drained, the same way you feel after a heavy workout. That fatigue is your trophy. Engineering the struggle. So how do you actually practice this? You start by calibrating your difficulty scale. Visualize a scale from 1 to 10, where 1 is watching a movie and 10 is trying to solve a math problem while your house is on fire. You want your study tasks to sit consistently between a 6 and an 8. If you're doing practice questions and getting 100% of them right, you are at a level 2 or 3. You are wasting your time. You need to increase the difficulty. Remove your notes. Set a shorter time limit. Move to the harder questions at the end of the chapter. Conversely, if you're getting everything wrong and feeling hopeless, you are at a 10. Dial it back. Open the book for a hint. Remove the time limit. You should structure your time into stretch blocks. These are short, intense periods of 20 to 30 minutes where you deliberately tackle the hardest thing you can find. Set a clear, difficult goal, such as solving 5 advanced problems without looking at the solution. During this block, you do not seek help immediately. You sit with the tension. You force your brain to try to bridge the gap. Between these intense blocks, you need micro-recovery. Because this kind of work is exhausting, you cannot do it for 4 hours straight. After a stretch block, take 5 minutes to walk away. Do not fill this time with social media or high-stimulation inputs, as that interferes with the memory consolidation process. Just let your brain cool down so you can ramp it back up for the next round. Psychological warfare. To survive this method, you need a few psychological tricks. The first is a simple mantra. When you feel that wave of frustration hit you, when you feel stuck and stupid, say to yourself, "Good, this is where I upgrade." Use this phrase to interrupt the reflex to quit. Over time, you will start to associate that feeling of friction with progress rather than danger. You also need to become a master of your difficulty dials. Think of your study session like a mixing board in a recording studio. You have sliders for time pressure, information support, and problem complexity. You are constantly adjusting these sliders in real time. If you are bored, slide the time pressure up. If you are panicked, slide the information support up. You are never a victim of the material. You are the operator of the difficulty. Always end on a win. The stretch zone can be demoralizing if you leave it feeling defeated. Structure your session so that the final problem or concept is one you can master. Finish the hard block with a successful explanation or a correctly solved equation. This preserves your confidence and ensures you are willing to come back and enter the ring again tomorrow. The callous mind. If you commit to this, the outcomes are profound. The first thing that happens is you stop fearing hard tasks. Most students look at a difficult assignment and feel dread. You will look at it and see an opportunity for speed. You will become resilient. When you are in an exam and you hit a question you don't immediately know, you won't panic. You will recognize the feeling of the stretch zone and you will know how to navigate it. Eventually, you will start to seek productive struggle. You will become the person who skips the easy introduction and goes straight to the complex problems because you know that is where the value is. You will learn faster than your peers because while they are spending hours polishing what they already know, you are spending minutes attacking what you don't. This becomes your competitive edge. In any competitive environment, whether it is law school, medical training, or the corporate world, most people will unconsciously avoid pain. They will gravitate toward the tasks that make them feel competent. By voluntarily stepping into the discomfort, you separate yourself from the pack. You treat discomfort as your personal training ground. Don't snap the band. However, you must be careful not to snap the elastic band. The most common pitfall is overloading yourself. You get motivated, you decide to embrace difficulty, and you jump straight into the deep end of a subject you have never seen before. You get crushed and you quit. Remember the principle: stretch, don't snap. You want to be just outside your current reach, not miles away from it. Another mistake is confusing chaos with challenge. You might try to learn 3 different complex topics at the same time, switching randomly between them. This increases difficulty, but it increases the wrong kind of difficulty. It creates cognitive noise rather than cognitive load. Keep the task hard, but keep the parameters clear. You should know exactly what you are trying to do. The difficulty should lie in the execution, not in the instructions. Finally, watch out for the urge to quit too early. There is a difference between being in the panic zone and just being frustrated. Use a minimum struggle rule. Commit to staying with a hard problem for at least 5 or 10 minutes before you allow yourself to look at the answer or switch tasks. Often, the breakthrough happens right after the moment you wanted to give up. If you quit at the first sign of resistance, you never give your brain the chance to find the solution. You now understand that the pain of learning is not a symptom of a problem, it is the mechanism of the solution. You are willing to sweat. You are willing to be uncomfortable. You are ready to enter the stretch zone and stay there. But simply being willing to struggle is not enough. You can struggle for hours and still not understand a concept if you are struggling in the wrong way. You can lift a heavy weight with terrible form and just injure yourself. We need to give you the correct form for your mental heavy lifting. We need to look at what exactly your brain should be doing while it is in that zone of high tension. In the next chapter, we will explore the difference between looking at information and actually dissecting it. There is a specific way to process new data that locks it into your long-term memory almost instantly, a technique that transforms you from a passive observer into a creator of meaning. It is time to go deep. Chapter 4: Deep Processing. You are acting like a human photocopier. Look at your current study routine. You open a textbook or a slide deck. You read a sentence. You look down at your notebook. You copy the sentence. You look back up. You read the next sentence. You copy that one too. Maybe, if you are feeling particularly artistic, you switch pens and underline a keyword in neon yellow. You feel productive because your hand is moving and pages are being filled. But if I were to stop you after 20 minutes, take away your notes, and ask you to explain the core logic of what you just wrote, you would likely stare at me in silence. You have successfully moved information from one piece of paper to another without it ever passing through your brain. This is the tragedy of the modern learner. You are obsessed with capturing information, but you are failing to process it. You are a note collector, hoarding facts like trinkets, hoping that if you gather enough of them, they will spontaneously assemble into wisdom. They won't. To learn at a speed that feels illegal, you have to stop acting like a photocopier and start acting like a translator. You have to stop trying to get through the material and start trying to dismantle it. This chapter is about the mental heavy lifting that turns temporary data into permanent knowledge. We call it deep processing. The difference between renting and buying. There is a fundamental difference between recognizing information and owning it. When you read a chapter and nod along, you are renting the information. It is in your head for the moment because the book is open in front of you. The rent is cheap. It costs very little mental effort, but the lease is short. As soon as you close the book, the landlord kicks you out. Owning the information requires a down payment. It requires a significant upfront cost of mental energy. You have to wrestle with the ideas, twist them, break them, and put them back together in your own words. But once you pay that cost, the information is yours. You don't need the book anymore. You can summon the concept in an exam, in a conversation, or in a crisis, completely unaided. Deep processing is the mechanism of ownership. It is based on a concept in psychology called levels of processing. The theory is simple. Your brain encodes what it works on. If you work on the surface features of the material, the font, the bold words, the order of the bullet points, your brain encodes the surface. This is shallow processing. It is like skipping a stone across a lake. You touch the water, but you never go under. If you work on the meaning, the relationships, and the implications of the material, your brain encodes the meaning. This is deep processing. It is like diving to the bottom of the lake. It takes more breath and more effort, but you actually see what is down there. Under pressure, the brain discards the shallow stuff. It holds on to the deep stuff. If you want clarity when the clock is ticking, you need to have processed the material deeply enough that it has become part of your mental architecture, not just a sticky note on your forehead. The heavy lifting of the mind. You might be thinking, this sounds exhausting. You are right, it is. Deep processing is the mental equivalent of lifting heavy weights. If you go to the gym and lift a pink plastic dumbbell 500 times, you will get bored, but you will not get strong. If you lift a heavy barbell 5 times, you will be sweating and shaking, but you will trigger muscle growth. Most students spend their lives lifting the pink dumbbell. They reread the chapter 5 times. They review their notes 10 times. They mistake repetition for intensity. Deep processing allows you to get massive gains with fewer reps. One session of deep, intense thinking is worth 5 sessions of passive review. You are trading volume for intensity. You are thinking harder now so you can study less later. This shift requires you to change your role. You are no longer a passive observer of the content. You are an interrogator. When you encounter a new fact or concept, you don't just accept it. You demand it explain itself. You ask, why is this true? How does it connect to what I learned yesterday? If I change this variable, what would happen to the result? This is the essence of the self-explanation effect. Research shows that when learners force themselves to explain a concept, even to themselves, they restructure the information in their brains. They identify gaps they didn't know they had. They simplify complex jargon into plain language. They stop memorizing the shape of the letters and start understanding the shape of the logic. The myths of the note collector. Before we get to the specific techniques, we need to kill the myths that keep you trapped in shallow waters. The first myth is that detailed notes equal deep understanding. You have likely been taught that the good student writes everything down. This is a lie. Writing everything down is often a defense mechanism against thinking. It is easier to transcribe a lecture than to analyze it in real time. You can have a notebook full of beautiful, color-coded notes and still fail the exam because you were acting as a scribe, not a thinker. Better thinking about fewer notes beats mindless transcription every time. The second myth is that understanding comes automatically after enough reading. You believe that if you just stare at the page long enough, the meaning will eventually seep into your pores by osmosis. It won't. Understanding is not something that happens to you. It is something you build. You have to actively construct the bridge between what you know and what you are trying to learn. The third myth is that explaining is only for teachers. You think, I'm just a student. I don't need to teach this. But the teacher mindset is the ultimate hack for the student. When you prepare to teach something, you process it differently. You look for the core principles. You anticipate questions. You organize the flow. You don't need a classroom. You just need the willingness to explain the concept to the empty air in your bedroom. The interrogation room. So how do you actually do this? How do you stop photocopying and start processing? The first tool in your arsenal is the Explain Without Notes exercise. This is terrifyingly simple and brutally effective. Read a short section of your material, maybe 3 paragraphs or 1 concept. Read it with full attention. Then close the book. Turn over your notes. Now, explain that concept out loud or write it down on a blank sheet of paper using entirely your own words. Do not use the jargon from the text unless you define it first. Imagine you are explaining it to a friend who is smart but has no background in the topic. You will likely stutter. You will pause. You will realize you remember the beginning and the end, but the middle is a blur. That moment of struggle is the deep processing happening. That is the weight being lifted. When you get stuck, open the book, find the specific gap, close the book, and try again. Do not move on until you can explain it fluidly without a safety net. The second tool is the why, how, what, if drill. Static facts are hard to remember. Living connections are hard to forget. For every key concept you study, ask 3 questions. 1. Why is this true? What is the underlying cause or proof? 2. How does it work? What is the mechanism or process? 3. What if I changed X? How would the outcome shift? If you are studying history and you read that a war started in 1914, don't just memorize the date. Ask, why did it start then? How did the alliances trigger the cascade? What if the assassination hadn't happened? Would the war have started anyway? Now you aren't memorizing a date, you are building a causal model of the event. The third tool is concept linking. Knowledge does not exist in a vacuum, it exists in a network. After you study a topic, list the 3 to 5 main ideas. Then, draw lines between them. Write a sentence on the line explaining how they relate. Does idea A cause idea B? Does idea B contradict idea C? Are they both examples of principle D? By mapping these connections, you are gluing the new information to the structures already in your brain. Tricks of the trade. To refine your deep processing, use the simple language rule. Academic language is often designed to be precise, but it can be dense and slippery. Your brain prefers concrete, simple stories. Force yourself to translate complex ideas into the language of a 12-year-old. If you can't simplify it, you don't understand it deeply. You are hiding behind the jargon. If you are in a technical field like math, physics, or finance, use the formulas to stories trick. A formula is just a sentence written in math. Don't memorize the symbols. Describe the story. Force equals mass times acceleration isn't just F equal Mahler. It is a story. How hard I hit you depends on how big I am and how fast I'm speeding up. When you turn abstract symbols into concrete reality, you give your brain a handle to grab onto. Finally, use compare and contrast as your default setting. The brain loves binary choices. It loves to distinguish things. Whenever you learn a new concept, immediately ask, what is this similar to, and how is it different? If you are learning about a new type of cell, ask how it is different from the cell you learned about last week. This prevents the dreaded exam soup, where all the terms blend together in your mind. The superpower of clarity. When you commit to deep processing, your study sessions will change. They will feel slower at first. You won't be flying through 50 pages an hour anymore. You might only get through 10, but those 10 pages will be locked in. You will leave the library with a coherent, solid picture of the subject, not a basket of loose fragments. You will develop the ability to teach what you know. This is a superpower in the real world. In meetings, interviews, and team projects, the person who can explain complex ideas simply is the person who leads. You will stop being the person who nods and pretends to understand, and become the person who clarifies the confusion for everyone else. But the biggest outcome is confidence. There is a specific type of anxiety that comes from shallow learning, the fear that a tricky question will expose your ignorance. Deep processing kills that fear. When you understand the core principles, you don't care if the exam question is phrased differently. You don't care if the professor throws a curveball. You know the physics of the idea, not just the definition. You are standing on solid ground. The trap of false speed. There is a danger here, and I need to warn you about it. Deep processing feels slow. When you are sitting there, staring at the wall, trying to formulate an explanation in your own words, you will feel like you are wasting time. You will look at your phone and see that 20 minutes have passed and you have only covered 2 concepts. Your old habits will scream at you. They will say, just copy the definition. It's faster. We have a lot to cover. Do not listen. You are trading shallow speed for massive time savings later. The student who rushes through the chapter today will have to reread it next week and the week after and the night before the exam. They are paying a high interest rate on their time. You are paying the principal up front. Once you process it deeply, the maintenance cost drops to almost zero. You might also feel discouraged because explaining things reveals your gaps. You will think you know something, try to explain it, and realize you have no idea how step A leads to step B. This is painful. It feels like failure. It is not. It is the most valuable data you can get. It is better to find that gap on a Tuesday afternoon than on Friday morning during the final. Treat every gap you find as a win. You just identified a landmine and disarmed it before you stepped on it. You have now learned how to upgrade your engine, method, how to fuel it with the right kind of effort, hard equals fast, and how to process the fuel for maximum efficiency, deep processing. You are building a powerful system for encoding information. But encoding is only half the battle. It doesn't matter how well you put the information in if you can't get it out when it counts. There is a mechanism in your brain that is responsible for retrieval, and most people leave it completely rusty until the day of the test. We are about to change that. We are going to flip a switch that turns your brain from a storage unit into a generator. In the next chapter, we will discuss the engine that powers true speed. It is the one habit that separates the amateurs from the pros, and it requires you to do the exact opposite of what most students do when they sit down to study. Chapter 5, Recall Engine. You are likely suffering from a severe case of input addiction. It is the most common ailment in the world of learning, and it is the primary reason you feel like you are working harder than the results you are getting. Here is the scenario. You have a big test coming up. You sit down, you open the book, you read, you highlight, you watch a lecture, you listen to a podcast, you read your notes again, you feel good, you feel full. You have spent hours pouring information into your eyes and ears. You go to sleep confident. Then you walk into the exam room, sit down, and flip over the paper. The first question asks for a definition or a process that you reviewed 12 hours ago. You freeze. You can see the page in your mind. You can see the color of the highlighter you used. You know exactly where it is in the book, but you cannot, for the life of you, write the answer down. The panic sets in. You think, but I studied this. I put the information in. That is exactly the problem. You spent all your time practicing input, but the exam and life itself is entirely a test of output. You trained to be a library, passively storing books on shelves, but the moment demanded that you be a printing press, generating new pages on command. This chapter is where we flip the switch. We are going to install a recall engine in your mind. We are going to stop asking, what should I read today? And start asking, what can I drag out of my brain today? This shift is aggressive. It is uncomfortable, but it is the single most powerful mechanical change you can make to increase your speed. If you do not have a recall engine, you do not have a learning system. You just have a hobby of looking at words. The output imperative. You need to understand a fundamental truth about how your brain holds on to things. It does not prioritize what it takes in, it prioritizes what it puts out. Think of your memory like a path through a dense forest. When you read a book, input, you are flying over the forest in a helicopter. You can see the path clearly. It looks easy. You recognize the landmarks. You think, I know the way. But when you close the book and try to recall the information, output, you are suddenly dropped on the ground in the middle of the trees with a machete. You have to hack your way through the undergrowth to find the path again. The first time you do this, it is slow, brutal, and exhausting. You get lost. You struggle. But that struggle is the point. By hacking through the brush, you are carving a trail. The next time you need to retrieve that information, the trail is already there. You can walk it faster. If you do it again, the trail becomes a road. If you do it enough times, it becomes a highway. Most students spend their lives in the helicopter. They look at the map over and over again, but they never actually walk the terrain. Then, when the exam forces them to walk, they realize they have no idea where they are. If you cannot say it, write it, or do it without looking at your notes, you do not know it. You only recognize it. And recognition is a fair-weather friend who will abandon you the moment the pressure mounts. You must accept that output beats input every single time. The science of the struggle. This isn't just a metaphor, it is biology. It is based on a principle called the testing effect. For decades, psychologists have known that the act of being tested on material does more for your memory than studying the material. When you read, you are passively exposing your neurons to a pattern. When you test yourself, when you force your brain to retrieve a memory, you are firing a high-voltage signal through those neural circuits. You are strengthening the synaptic connections. Every time you pull a memory out, you resave it with a stronger, more durable coding. This leads us to the concept of active recall. This is the practice of closing your eyes and trying to reconstruct the information from scratch. It is the opposite of passive review. Passive review is looking at your notes and saying, "Yep, got it." Active recall is looking at a blank wall and asking, "What was the third point on that slide?" and waiting for the answer to surface. There is an even deeper layer to this called the generation effect. This is where things get truly interesting. Research shows that if you try to generate an answer before you know the right one, even if you guess wrong, you will learn the correct answer better when you finally see it. The struggle to generate an answer primes the brain. It opens a curiosity gap. Your brain realizes it has a hole in its knowledge, so when the correct answer is revealed, it rushes to fill that hole like concrete pouring into a mold. This means that getting things wrong during practice is actually more productive than reading them right the first time. Your failures are not setbacks. They are the digging process that allows the foundation to be poured. Breaking the recognition trap. We have to dismantle the myths that keep you safe in your helicopter. The biggest one is the idea that testing is only for measuring. You have been conditioned by school to believe that a test is a judgment day. You study to get ready for the test. You need to invert this. The test is the study. You shouldn't test yourself to see what grade you would get. You should test yourself because the act of testing is what creates the grade. A quiz is not a scorecard. It is a gym session. Every question you answer from memory is a rep. The second myth is the "I know it when I see it" defense. This is the siren song of the lazy brain. You look at a vocabulary word or a chemical formula and think, "I know that." But recognition relies on external triggers. The exam question might be phrased differently. The context might change. If you rely on recognition, you are fragile. If you rely on recall, you are anti-fragile. When you can rebuild the concept from zero, the phrasing of the question doesn't matter. You own the source code. The third myth is that recall is too slow. You might think, "I have 5 chapters to cover. I don't have time to stop and quiz myself on every page." This is an illusion. Rereading feels fast because you are moving your eyes quickly, but it is actually the slowest method on earth because you have to do it 6 times to retain anything. Active recall feels slow because you have to stop and think, but it is efficient. 1 hour of recall is worth 10 hours of rereading. It is a time saver disguised as a time sink. The blank sheet of paper. So how do you install this engine? You start with the most terrifying tool in the student's arsenal, the blank sheet of paper. We call this the brain dump. Before you start your study session, before you open a single book or look at a single slide, take a blank piece of paper and a pen. Set a timer for 5 or 10 minutes. Now, write down everything you remember from the last session. Everything. Key concepts, dates, formulas, random fragments. It will be painful. You will sit there for the first minute with a completely empty mind. You will feel stupid. You will want to check your phone. Do not do it. Let the silence pressure your brain. Eventually, a thread will appear. You will pull it. One fact will lead to another. You will sketch a messy diagram. You will remember a definition. When the timer goes off, look at your paper. That messy scrawl is your actual knowledge. Everything that is not on that paper is just an illusion. Now, open your book. Compare your brain dump to the material. The things you missed will jump out at you like neon signs. Your brain will lock onto them because it just spent 10 minutes desperately searching for them. This simple exercise transforms your study session from a passive wander into a targeted search and rescue mission. Interrogating the text. Once you're in the thick of studying, you need to change how you interact with your materials. Most people read headings as statements. The causes of the French Revolution. You read that and think, okay, here come the causes. Stop doing that. Turn every heading into a question. When you see the causes of the French Revolution, look away and ask, what were the causes of the French Revolution? Try to answer it before you read the text. Force your brain to generate a hypothesis. If you are taking notes, do not write down facts. Write down questions. Instead of writing, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, write, What is the function of the mitochondria on the left side of the page and the answer on the right, or on the back if you're using flashcards? This allows you to turn your notes into a recall generator. When you review, you don't just read your notes, you cover the answers and ask the questions. You are constantly testing, constantly retrieving, constantly hacking through the forest. You should also build mini tests into your workflow. Do not wait for the end of the chapter. After every few pages, stop. Close the book. Ask yourself, what were the 3 main ideas I just read? If you can't name them, you didn't learn them. You just looked at them. Go back and find them, then look away and try again. The lifestyle of retrieval. You can take this engine out of the library and into your life. You have pockets of dead time throughout your day, waiting for the bus, standing in line for coffee, walking to class. These are prime opportunities for micro-recall. Instead of pulling out your phone to scroll through social media, play a game with yourself. Ask, what are 3 things I learned yesterday? Try to retrieve them while you wait for your latte. Talk to yourself. Explain the concept out loud as if you were teaching it to an invisible person walking next to you. There is a magic to speaking it out loud. When you think inside your head, you can cheat. You can have a fuzzy, vague idea and tell yourself you know it. But when you have to articulate it into complete sentences, the fuzziness is exposed. You realize you know the idea of the definition, but you can't actually say the definition. Speaking forces precision. You should also mix up your retrieval types. Sometimes use free recall, where you just dump everything you know about a topic. Other times use cued recall, where you use flashcards or specific questions to target precise details. Free recall builds the broad structure. Cued recall sharpens the details. You need both to be dangerous. The reality check. When you commit to the recall engine, the results are binary. You will either know it or you will know that you don't know it. There is no middle ground. This provides a massive psychological advantage, the end of false confidence. You will stop walking into exams thinking you are prepared only to be blindsided. You will discover your gaps on Tuesday afternoon in the safety of your room rather than on Friday morning in the exam hall. But the ultimate payoff is exam-ready recall. By the time the actual test arrives, you will have already taken it 50 times in your head. You will have retrieved the information so many times that the neural pathway is a paved highway. You won't have to panic or search. You will just drive. This skill translates directly to the real world. In a high-stakes meeting, nobody is going to give you 20 minutes to look up the answer in your notes. They want the answer now. The person who can access their mental database instantly is the person who commands the room. You are building a mind that works in real time. The Valley of Despair. I need to warn you about the first week. Installing the recall engine feels terrible. It is demoralizing. You will do a brain dump and realize you remember almost nothing. You will try to answer questions and get them wrong. You will feel stupid. You will have a strong urge to cheat. You will want to peek at your notes just for a second to get a hint. Do not do it. That peek destroys the process. It is like having a spotter lift the weight for you at the gym. You feel the bar go up, but you didn't do the work. Set a strict no-peek window. Tell yourself, I am not allowed to open the book for 3 minutes. Sit in the discomfort. Let your brain sweat. That feeling of frustration is not a sign that you are failing. It is a sign that the engine is revving up. Also, do not fall into the trap of overbuilding your system. Do not spend 3 days creating a complex digital flashcard deck with tagged categories and subdecks. That is just another form of procrastination. It is fake productivity. Better to have 10 questions scribbled on a napkin that you actually answer than 1,000 beautiful flashcards that you never use. You now have the engine. You know how to force your brain to retrieve, generate, and strengthen memories. You are no longer a passive container. You are an active generator. But even the best engine in the world is useless if you run it at the wrong times. You can have perfect recall methods, but if you cram them all into one sleepless night, you will still crash. There is a specific rhythm to memory, a mathematical pattern of fading and strengthening that dictates exactly when you should study to get maximum speed. In the next chapter, we are going to look at the clock. We are going to discover why studying for 1 hour today is worth 5 hours next week, and how to manipulate time so that you can learn more by actually studying less. It is time to stop fighting the calendar and start using it as a weapon. Chapter 6: Timing Advantage. You are likely fighting a war against time, and you are losing. The standard student strategy is to treat time like a credit card. You ignore the debt all semester, doing the bare minimum, and then 3 days before the exam, you try to pay it all off in one massive, panic-induced lump sum. You pull the all-nighter. You drink enough caffeine to kill a horse. You stare at your notes until your vision blurs. And the worst part? It seems to work. You walk into the exam, vomit the information onto the page, and scrape by with a decent grade. You tell yourself, I work best under pressure. You are lying to yourself. You do not work best under pressure. You work inefficiently under pressure. That all-nighter didn't prove your resilience. It proved your lack of strategy. While you managed to pass the test, you likely forgot 90% of the material within a week. You rented the knowledge at an exorbitant interest rate instead of buying it. If you want to learn at a speed that feels unfair to everyone else, you have to stop fighting the clock and start using it as a weapon. There is a mathematical rhythm to how the human brain encodes and keeps information. If you fight this rhythm, by cramming, you are swimming upstream. If you align with it, the current carries you. This chapter is about the timing advantage. It's about how doing less work at the right time produces more results than doing massive work at the wrong time. The mathematics of memory. To understand why your current schedule is broken, you have to understand the forgetting curve. When you learn a new fact or concept, your memory of it is not stable. It immediately begins to decay. This decay is exponential. Within 24 hours, you might lose 50 to 80% of what you just learned. It falls off a cliff. Most people try to fix this by relearning the material from scratch right before the deadline. They let the memory decay to zero, and then they push the boulder back up the hill. This is exhausting. The timing advantage relies on a technique called spaced repetition. The concept is simple but profound. You should review material at the exact moment you are about to forget it. Imagine the memory is a muscle. If you lift a weight and then immediately lift it again, the second rep is easy. It does very little for your strength. But if you wait until your muscle has recovered and is just starting to weaken, the next lift is heavy. It requires recruitment of more fibers. That struggle triggers growth. The same applies to your neurons. If you review your notes 5 minutes after writing them, you are wasting your time. The memory is too fresh. The retrieval is too easy. But if you wait one day, the memory has faded slightly. It requires effort to pull it back. That effort tells your brain, this is important, keep it. When you review it a day later, the decay curve flattens. You don't forget it as fast. So next time, you can wait 3 days, then a week, then a month. You are interrupting the forgetting process. By spacing your reviews out, you can retain a massive amount of information with a fraction of the total hours. You are not working harder. You are just working with better timing. The illusion of the block. There is another timing trap you fall into, and it concerns what you study during a session. It is called blocked practice. Blocked practice is when you study one topic until you feel you have mastered it, and then you move to the next. You do history for 3 hours on Monday. You do math for 3 hours on Tuesday. Inside your math session, you do all the algebra problems, then all the geometry problems. This feels productive because it creates a strong sense of flow. You get into a groove, you see the pattern of the algebra problems, and you just plug and chug. You feel like a genius. But once again, feeling like a genius during study often means you are being an idiot about learning. Blocked practice is weak because it removes the hardest part of the problem, identifying what strategy to use. If you know you are doing a block of algebra, you don't have to ask, is this algebra or geometry? You just apply the formula. The alternative is interleaving. This means mixing topics or problem types within a single session. Instead of doing BBBCCC, you do ABCBCA CAB. When you interleave, you feel frustrated. You just got your head around the history date, and now you have to switch to a chemical equation. Your brain has to constantly reload different programs. It feels choppy. It feels slow. You might even get more questions wrong during the session. But here's the payout. Interleaving teaches you to discriminate. In the real world and on real exams, the problems don't come in neat, labeled blocks. They come at you randomly. You have to look at a problem and decide which tool to pull from your belt. Interleaving trains that decision-making process. Blocked practice trains you to be a robot. Interleaving trains you to be a pilot. Killing the cramming myth. We need to address the elephant in the room. You are addicted to cramming because it provides a false sense of security. It is a ritual. The pain of the all-nighter makes you feel like you earned the grade. You need to understand that cramming is a biological lie. Your brain requires sleep to consolidate memory. When you learn something, it sits in a temporary state. During sleep, the brain moves it to long-term storage and clears out the metabolic waste products that build up during intense thinking. When you cram, you are filling the temporary buffer to the brim and then staying awake, denying the brain the chance to save the file. It is like typing a 10,000-word essay and never hitting save, hoping the power doesn't go out. The moment you walk out of that exam, the power goes out. The information vanishes. If you care about your future, if you actually want to be smart, not just credentialed, you have to stop renting knowledge. Spacing allows you to own it. It allows you to walk into the exam room with the confidence of someone who has seen the material 5 times over the last month, not someone holding a mental house of cards together with caffeine and anxiety. Designing the schedule. So how do you actually build this? You do not need a complex algorithm or an expensive app. You just need a calendar and a little bit of discipline. The schedule is built on the 1-3-7 framework. When you learn a new topic, day 0, you must review it the next day, day 1. This first review is critical. It stops the initial free fall of forgetting. Then you review it 3 days later, day 4. Then a week later, day 11. This sounds like a lot of tracking, but it isn't. It takes 30 seconds to plan. When you finish a study session on the French Revolution, you open your calendar. You go to tomorrow's date and write Review French Rev. You go 3 days forward and write it again. You go a week forward and write it again. These reviews are not 3-hour deep dives. They are short, sharp recall sessions. They might take 15 minutes. You are just refreshing the trace. Because you are catching the memory before it disappears, the review is efficient. You aren't relearning, you are reinforcing. For interleaving, change how you structure your daily blocks. If you have 2 hours to study, do not spend 2 hours on one subject. Split it into 3 40-minute blocks of different subjects. Or, if you're doing math, mix the problem sets. Do 2 calculus problems, then 2 algebra problems, then 2 statistics problems. Force your brain to switch gears. The micro-review habit. You can supercharge this system by utilizing the dead time in your day. Most people think they need a quiet room and a desk to study. This is false. You can do high-quality spacing work while waiting for the bus, brushing your teeth, or waiting for the microwave. These are micro-reviews. If you have 5 minutes, look at your calendar, see what is due for a review, and do a quick mental recall. What were the 3 main points from the lecture 3 days ago? This keeps the memory warm. It prevents the dust from settling. By sprinkling these micro-reviews throughout your week, you reduce the need for heavy, dedicated study blocks. You are greasing the groove. Tricks for the timeline. To make this stick, follow the calendar not mood rule. Amateurs study when they feel inspired or panicked. Professionals study when the calendar says so. If your schedule says review chapter 4, you do it, even if you don't feel like it. You remove the negotiation. Use color coding to visualize your time horizons. Mark topics that are new in red. Mark topics that are in the 3-day review phase in yellow. Mark topics that are in the weekly maintenance phase in green. Your goal is to move everything from red to green. This gives you a visual dashboard of your brain's inventory. And always combine spacing with recall. Do not just read your notes on day 3. That is passive. On day 3, quiz yourself. The combination of spaced repetition and active recall is the nuclear weapon of learning. It is the most efficient way to encode information known to cognitive science. The long game. When you adopt this timing strategy, the outcomes are life-changing. The first thing you notice is the silence. The panic noise in your head quiets down. You stop worrying about whether you are ready because you have a system that ensures you are ready. You also gain the ability to retain information long-term. Imagine finishing a course and actually remembering the content 6 months later. Imagine starting the next level of the course and not having to relearn the basics. You start to accumulate knowledge like compound interest. But there are pitfalls. The biggest one is overcomplication. You can get so obsessed with the perfect intervals that you spend more time planning than studying. Do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. If you miss the 3-day review and do it on day 4, you will not die. The point is to space it out, not to be a robot. Another pitfall is the busy trap. You will have days where you are swamped. You will be tempted to skip your reviews. Do not do this. Use the minimum viable review. If you can't do 15 minutes, do 2 minutes. Just recall the main header. Keep the chain unbroken. The next level. You have now upgraded your method, embraced difficulty, turned on the recall engine, and mastered the clock. You are operating at a level of efficiency that most students never dream of. You are doing the right work at the right time. But there is one final bottleneck. Even if you are efficient, there is a limit to how many isolated facts your brain can hold. If you try to memorize 1,000 random numbers, you will fail. But if you realize those numbers follow a pattern, you can memorize them instantly. Speed is not just about processing faster, it is about compressing the data. You need a way to turn 100 pages of information into a single mental image. You need to stop seeing the leaves and start seeing the tree. In the next chapter, we are going to explore the architecture of understanding. We are going to look at how geniuses organize information in their heads, and how you can build mental models that allow you to absorb complex subjects as if you were just slotting pieces into a puzzle you have already solved. It is time to learn how to chunk. Chapter 7. Mental Models. Imagine you are looking at a chessboard in the middle of a game. If you are a novice, you see 32 pieces scattered in a chaotic mess. You see a white knight here, a black pawn there, and a bishop somewhere else. To memorize the board, you would have to memorize the position of every single piece individually. It would take you minutes, and you would likely make mistakes. Now, imagine a grandmaster looks at the same board for 5 seconds. They turn away and reconstruct it perfectly. They are not using a photographic memory. They are not smarter than you. They simply did not see 32 pieces. They saw 3 meaningful patterns. They saw a Sicilian defense structure, a weak kingside, and an exposed bishop. They chunked the chaos into a few recognizable units. This is the secret of the natural genius. When you see someone learn a complex subject in record time, you are witnessing the power of mental models. They are not memorizing data. They are slotting information into a pre-existing framework. They are not building a house brick by brick. They are sliding prefabricated walls into place. Most students approach learning like a hoarder. They collect facts, dates, formulas, and definitions, and they pile them up in their brain until the room is full and they can't find anything. This chapter is about cleaning up that room. We are going to teach you how to install shelving units in your mind. We are going to move you from a data collector to a pattern recognizer. The compression algorithm of the mind. You need to understand that your working memory is pathetic. It can only hold about 4 to 7 items at once. If you try to hold 10 isolated facts, you will drop 3 of them. This is a hardware limitation. You cannot upgrade this RAM. However, you can hack the software. This is where chunking comes in. Chunking is the process of binding individual pieces of information together into a meaningful whole. If I ask you to memorize the letters HBOCNNIRS, you will struggle. That is 9 units of information. But if I rearrange them into HBOCNNIRS, you can memorize it instantly. You haven't changed the data, you have changed the structure. You compressed 9 units into 3 chunks. Mental models are simply sophisticated chunks. They are schemas, mental templates that help you organize reality. When you have a strong mental model for a subject, you don't have to memorize every detail because the model predicts the details for you. If you understand the model of supply and demand, you don't need to memorize what happens to the price of coffee when a frost hits Brazil. You just run the model. The frost kills the supply, demand stays the same, so the price must go up. You derive the fact instead of memorizing it. This is how you achieve speed. You stop trying to carry the weight of 1,000 isolated facts and start carrying a few powerful frameworks that hold the facts for you. The Velcro effect. The most frustrating thing about being a beginner is that nothing sticks. You read a page and it slides right off your brain. This happens because you have no hooks for the new information to latch onto. Prior knowledge is not just a pile of old facts, it is the Velcro that catches new facts. The more mental models you have installed, the stickier your mind becomes. When a polymath reads a book about biology, they aren't starting from scratch. They are connecting the new ideas to their existing models of chemistry, evolution, and systems theory. The new information snaps into place instantly. This creates a compounding effect. The first model you build is hard. It takes time to construct the framework, but the second model is easier because you can borrow parts from the first. By the time you are building your 10th model, you are learning at a geometric pace. You are not adding to your knowledge, you are multiplying it. This is why you must invest time in building structure early. If you dive straight into the details without a map, you are wandering in a swamp. You will get lost in the weeds. But if you build the map first, if you understand the big picture framework, every detail you encounter has a specific address where it belongs. You aren't wandering, you are filing. Shattering the detail myth. We need to destroy the myth that details come first. School often teaches this backward. They give you the dates, the names, and the vocabulary words, and they hope that eventually you will see the big picture. This is like giving someone a pile of doorknobs and hinges and expecting them to build a house. You must flip this. The big picture comes first. You need the skeleton before you can hang the meat. When you start a new topic, ignore the nuance. Ignore the exceptions. Look for the shape. Is this a system? Is it a hierarchy? Is it a timeline? Once you have the shape, the details become easy to memorize because they are just decorations on the structure. You also need to stop believing that drawing diagrams is for art class. Many students feel guilty when they spend time sketching out a map of the chapter. They feel like they should be reading or highlighting. But externalizing your model is one of the highest yield activities you can do. When you draw a map, you are forcing your brain to make decisions about relationships. You have to decide, does A cause B? Is C part of D? Those decisions are the learning. The diagram is just the proof that you did the thinking. The construction site. So how do you actually build these models? You start with the one-page map. When you finish a chapter or a lecture, do not just close the book. Take a blank sheet of paper. In the center, write the core concept. Then, draw 3 or 4 main branches coming off it. These are the big ideas. From those branches, draw smaller twigs for the supporting details. This is not about making it look pretty. It's about compression. You are trying to fit the entire lecture onto one page. This forces you to be ruthless. You have to strip away the fluff and find the bone structure. If you can't fit it on one page, you haven't chunked it enough. You are still looking at the pieces, not the pattern. Another powerful tool is the 3 buckets technique. Complexity is overwhelming. When you're facing a wall of information, your anxiety spikes. To kill the anxiety, simplify the chaos into 3 buckets. If you are studying the human body, your buckets might be structure, function, and regulation. Everything you learn must go into one of those three buckets. If you're studying a business case, your buckets might be product, market, and finance. By forcing the data into these categories, you reduce the cognitive load. You aren't juggling 100 balls, you are just holding three buckets. For processes, use the flow method. If you are learning a sequence, like a chemical reaction, a legal procedure, or a historical timeline, do not write it as a list. Lists are static. Draw it as a flow. Use arrows. Add if-then decision points. If the judge rules X, then we go to step Y. This turns a dead list into a living algorithm that you can run in your head. The analogical bridge. If you want to build models faster, steal them. You already have hundreds of models in your head from your daily life. You understand how sports work. You understand how video games work. You understand how a kitchen works. Use these existing models as analogies for the new stuff. This is the analogical bridge. When you encounter a confusing abstract concept, ask yourself, what is this like? Is the electric current like water flowing through a pipe? Is the immune system like a castle defense with guards and walls? Is the computer's memory like a desk workspace? These analogies are never perfect, but they are fast. They give you a rough draft of understanding instantly. You can refine the details later, but the analogy gives you a handle to grab onto right now. It allows you to bypass the confusion and get straight to the structure. Zooming for flexibility. Once you have your model, you need to exercise it. You do this by zooming. A good learner can zoom in to the microscopic detail and then zoom out to the bird's eye view in seconds. Most students get stuck in one mode. They are either lost in the clouds of generalities or drowning in the weeds of specifics. Practice switching. Look at a detail, say a specific date in history, and ask, where does this fit in the big timeline? Zoom out. Then look at the big timeline and ask, what is a specific example of this trend? Zoom in. This mental gymnastics keeps your model flexible. It ensures that you aren't just memorizing a static picture, but building a dynamic map that you can navigate. You should also maintain a model library. Keep your best maps and diagrams. Don't throw them away after the test. These are your intellectual assets. Over time, you will see that the same models show up in different subjects. A feedback loop in biology looks a lot like a feedback loop in economics. A hierarchy in computer science looks like a hierarchy in corporate management. As your library grows, your ability to learn new subjects accelerates because you're just reusing old keys to open new doors. The trap of the decorator. There is a danger in this method. You can become a decorator instead of an architect. I have seen students spend 3 hours making a mind map. They use rulers, they use stencils, they draw little icons. This is procrastination disguised as study. The value of the map is in the making, not the viewing. The moment you understand the structure, the map has done its job. Do not polish it, scribble it, understand it, and move on. You also have to watch out for over-chunking. If you group everything into such big categories that you lose the nuance, you will fail the test. You might know that economics is about supply and demand, but if you can't calculate the elasticity, you are in trouble. The model is the rack, but you still need to hang the clothes. You must balance the big picture with periodic drills on the details to ensure your buckets aren't empty. Finally, never copy a model blindly. If you find a great diagram in a textbook, do not just photocopy it into your notes. That is passive. You must redraw it. You must change it. You must explain it. If you cannot redraw the model from memory, you do not own the model. You just rented a picture of it. The precision strike. You have now built a formidable learning machine. You have the right mindset, hard equals fast. You have the right engine, recall. You have the right fuel injection, deep processing. You have the right timing, spacing. And now you have the right storage architecture, mental models. You are no longer a slow learner. You are a system-driven learner. You can absorb information, retain it, and organize it faster than 99% of the population. But there is one final piece of the puzzle. Even with all these tools, you can still waste time if you are pointing them at the wrong target. You can be incredibly efficient at learning things that don't matter or improving skills that are already good enough. To reach the level of illegal speed, you need to stop just practicing and start training. You need to learn how to identify the single bottleneck that is holding you back and attack it with surgical precision. You need to stop using a shotgun and start using a sniper rifle. In the next chapter, we are going to talk about how to turn your study sessions into high-performance drills. We are going to discuss the difference between doing and improving, and how to use data to find the exact weak point that, once fixed, will unlock everything else. It is time to get deliberate. Chapter 8: Deliberate Speed. You are likely suffering from the zombie student syndrome. This is a condition where you go through the motions of studying without actually improving. You sit at your desk, you open your books, you do the assigned problems, you put in the hours. But if I were to test your skills today and then test them again in a week, the difference would be negligible. You are maintaining your knowledge, perhaps, but you are not sharpening it. You are running on a treadmill, lots of sweat, zero distance. The reason for this stagnation is that you are confusing doing with training. When a professional tennis player has a weak backhand, they do not just go out and play casual matches for 3 hours. That would be doing. Instead, they hire a coach to feed them 500 balls to their backhand side in a row. They analyze the grip. They adjust the footwork. They fail, adjust, and fail again until the weakness becomes a weapon. That is training. Most students never train. They just play matches. They do the homework problems from 1 to 10 because the teacher said so. They read the chapter from start to finish because that is how the book is printed. They are reactive, not proactive. They are hoping that by sheer exposure to the material, they will get smarter. To reach the kind of learning speed that feels illegal, you have to stop acting like a student and start acting like a performance athlete. You need to stop studying and start engaging in deliberate practice. This is the shift from random repetition to surgical improvement. It is the difference between firing a shotgun into the air and hoping you hit a bird and using a sniper rifle to hit the bullseye from a mile away. The ROI of your attention. Time is your investment capital. Every minute you spend studying is a dollar you are investing in your future grade or skill. The problem is that you are diversifying your portfolio too much. You are spreading your time evenly across things you already know and things you don't. This is a terrible investment strategy. If you already know how to solve a quadratic equation, doing 50 more of them is a waste of capital. The return on investment, ROI, is near zero. You are just making yourself feel good because you are getting green check marks. Deliberate speed comes from ruthlessly allocating your capital to the highest yield opportunities. In learning, the highest yield always comes from your bottlenecks. A bottleneck is the narrowest part of the bottle. It limits how fast the water can pour out. In your brain, the bottleneck is the specific sub-skill or concept that is capping your performance. If you are failing chemistry, it is rarely because you are bad at chemistry. That is too vague. It is because you have a bottleneck in converting grams to moles. Or perhaps your bottleneck is recalling the periodic table trends. If you fix the bottleneck, the entire system flows faster. If you ignore the bottleneck and just study chemistry generally, you will work for hours and see no improvement because the constraint is still there. The myth of the grind. We live in a culture that worships the grind. We are told that if we just work harder, we will win. But in learning, grinding without direction is actually dangerous. If you practice a piano scale with the wrong fingering for 4 hours, you haven't learned the scale. You have crystallized a mistake. You have built a bad habit that will now take twice as long to fix. Mindless repetition hardens whatever you are doing, whether it is right or wrong. You must reject the myth that quantity equals quality. Doing 100 math problems blindly is worse than doing 10 problems where you dissect every step. You don't need to do more. You need to do better. You need to stop trusting the grind and start trusting the target. This requires a shift in how you view goals. Most students have vague, fuzzy goals. I need to get better at Spanish. This is useless. It gives you no direction. A deliberate learner sets sharp, terrifyingly specific goals. I need to be able to conjugate these 10 irregular verbs in the past tense within 60 seconds with 0 errors. When the goal is that specific, you can't hide. You either hit it or you don't. And if you don't, you know exactly what you need to work on next. The diagnostic protocol. So, how do you turn your study session into a surgical suite? It starts with diagnosis. You cannot fix a problem you haven't defined. Before you start a session, look at your past performance. Look at the last quiz, the last practice set, or your last recall attempt. Where did you fail? Do not just look at the score. Look at the cause. You need to categorize your errors. Was it a knowledge gap? Did you simply not know the fact or the formula? If so, the fix is deep processing and recall. Was it a comprehension gap? Did you know the formula but not how to apply it to this specific weird scenario? If so, the fix is building better mental models and doing what-if drills. Was it a speed issue? Did you know how to do it, but it took you 10 minutes instead of 2? If so, the fix is timed sprints to build fluency. Was it a careless error? Did you misread the question? If so, the fix is behavioral, forcing yourself to underline key terms before answering. Once you identify the bottleneck, you rank them. You attack the biggest constraint first. You do not touch the things you are good at until you have addressed the thing that is killing you. This requires swallowing your ego because working on your bottleneck makes you feel stupid. It forces you to spend your time doing exactly what you are worst at. But that is the price of speed. Designing the drill. Once you have found the bottleneck, you design a drill to break it. This is where you become your own coach. You don't just do homework. You invent an exercise that isolates the variable you want to improve. Let's say your bottleneck is speed in solving calculus derivatives. You don't just do the homework set. You set a timer for 5 minutes and see how many simple derivatives you can solve. You race against yourself. You record the number. Then you take a break and try to beat that number. You are isolating the variable of speed and attacking it directly. If your bottleneck is vocabulary retention in a new language, you don't just read the textbook. You create a recall sprint. You put 20 words on a list and give yourself 1 minute to define as many as possible out loud. You do this 5 times in a row, shuffling the order. These drills should be short, intense, and uncomfortable. They are not designed to be pleasant. They are designed to overload the specific neural circuit that is weak. You're putting that specific muscle under maximum tension. The feedback loop. Deliberate practice dies without feedback. If you are shooting basketballs in the dark, you will never get better because you don't know if the ball went in the hoop. You need to know immediately if you were right or wrong. This is why textbooks with the answers in the back are gold. This is why practice software that grades you instantly is valuable. You need to tighten the loop between action and result. If you are writing an essay, feedback is harder to get. You can't just check the back of the book. In this case, you have to create your own feedback. Compare your essay to a model answer. Go sentence by sentence. What did the model do that you didn't? Did they use more precise verbs? Did they structure the argument differently? You can also use the Feynman feedback loop. Try to explain the concept to a wall. The moment you stutter, the moment you have to wave your hands and say, it's like, that is your feedback. That is the hole in your understanding. Stop immediately. Go back to the source. Fill the hole. Then try again. Embracing ugly practice. If you walk into a gym and see someone who looks perfect, hair done, matching outfit, not a drop of sweat, they are probably not training very hard. The person in the corner with the stained shirt, gasping for air, making weird faces, that is the person who is getting stronger. Study is the same. If your notes look like a work of art, with perfect handwriting and straight lines, you might be prioritizing aesthetics over cognition. Deliberate practice is ugly. It is messy. It involves scribbling furiously on scrap paper. It involves talking to yourself and sounding crazy. It involves getting questions wrong and crossing them out with a big red X. You need to embrace the ugly practice. Your scratch pad is a battlefield. It should be covered in the blood and guts of your mistakes. If you are afraid to make a mess, you are afraid to push your limits. Use micro goals to keep yourself engaged in this mess. For every 20-minute block, set a tiny binary goal. I will solve these 3 problems without looking at my notes. At the end of the 20 minutes, you either won or you lost. Keep a tally. This gamifies the struggle. It turns a boring Tuesday afternoon into a series of small championships. The trap of metric obsession. There is a danger here. When you start setting goals and tracking data, you can become obsessed with the numbers and lose sight of the learning. This is called Goodhart's Law. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. If your goal is to read 50 pages, you will rush through them just to hit the number, retaining nothing. If your goal is to do 100 flashcards, you will flip them so fast you don't actually recall the answers. Metrics are tools, not masters. They are there to guide your effort, not to replace your judgment. Always pair a quantitative goal, numbers, with a qualitative check, understanding. Yes, you did 50 flashcards, but can you explain the concepts behind them? If the answer is no, the number is a lie. The transferable engine. When you master deliberate practice, you get more than just good grades. You get a transferable improvement engine. You realize that the same process you use to ace organic chemistry applies to learning to code, learning to speak in public, or learning to play the guitar. You stop being intimidated by new skills because you know the algorithm for mastery. You know how to break a skill down, identify the sub-skills, find the bottlenecks, and design drills to fix them. You become a machine that can ingest any new domain and output competence. You start to see yourself differently. You are no longer a passive student hoping the teacher explains it well. You are a performance architect. You take full responsibility for the outcome. If you aren't learning fast enough, you don't blame the book, you blame the drill. You adjust, you iterate, you improve. The final integration. We have covered a lot of ground. We have rebuilt your methods, reframed your relationship with difficulty, installed a recall engine, hacked the timeline, organized your mental architecture, and now sharpened your practice into a laser beam. You have the system, you have the tools, you know exactly what to do to learn faster than you ever thought possible. But there is one thing left. It is the invisible force that will determine whether you actually use these tools for the rest of your life, or whether you let them gather dust after you finish this book. It is not a technique. It is not a hack. It is a fundamental shift in how you view your own existence and your potential in the world. In the final chapter, we are going to talk about the lifetime edge. We are going to look at what happens when you take these illegal learning speeds and apply them to your career, your relationships, and your identity. We are going to talk about what it really means to be the person who knows they can learn anything. And I am going to ask you to make a promise to yourself that you cannot break. Chapter 9, Lifetime Edge. You are not the same person who opened the first page of this book. When we started, you were likely frustrated. You were working hard, burning the midnight oil, and feeling like you were running through mud while others were sprinting on pavement. You believed a story about yourself that said your brain was the problem. You thought you were slow. You thought you had hit your genetic ceiling. That version of you is gone. We have dismantled that story, brick by brick, and replaced it with a machine. You now understand that speed is not a gift, it is a mechanism. You know that learning is not a mystical event that happens to you, it is a manufacturing process that you control. This final chapter is not about study tips. We are done with tips. This chapter is about what happens when you take this new machine out of the garage and drive it on the open road of your life. We are going to talk about the lifetime edge. This is the unfair advantage that accumulates when you stop struggling to keep up and start setting the pace. The arsenal you now possess. Let's take a moment to look at the weapons you have strapped to your belt. You are no longer walking into battle with a butter knife. You have the method upgrade. You know that passive input is a lie and that active output is the only path to retention. You have stopped rereading and started retrieving. You have productive difficulty. You no longer run from confusion. You know that the feeling of mental strain is the specific sensation of your brain rewiring itself, and you lean into it. You have deep processing. You don't just collect facts, you interrogate them. You turn data into meaning by asking why and how until the concept locks into place. You have the recall engine. You have flipped the switch from consumer to generator. You test yourself before you feel ready, and you use the pain of forgetting to build the strength of remembering. You have the timing advantage. You have stopped fighting the forgetting curve and started hacking it with spacing and interleaving. You use the calendar as a lever to move mountains with less effort. You have mental models. You don't memorize chaos, you organize it. You build structures and schemas that allow you to slot new information into place instantly. And you have deliberate speed. You know how to find your bottleneck and attack it with surgical drills. This is not just a list of techniques. It is an operating system. When you combine these tools, you create a compounding effect. You learn faster, which means you know more, which means you have more mental models, which means you learn the next thing even faster. It is a positive feedback loop that spirals upward for the rest of your life. The quiet swagger of competence. The most immediate change you will feel is not in your grades, but in your nervous system. There is a specific type of anxiety that plagues the slow learner. It is the fear of being found out. It is the fear of the unknown. When you are assigned a new project at work or a new module at university, your first reaction used to be a tightening in your chest. You would think, I hope this isn't too hard. I hope I can handle this. That fear is replaced by a quiet, grounded swagger. It isn't arrogance. It is self-efficacy. It is the knowledge that you have a protocol for the unknown. When you face a complex topic now, you don't look at it as a threat. You look at it as a puzzle, and you know exactly how to solve it. You know how to break it down, how to chunk it, and how to drill it. This changes your relationship with opportunity. The slow learner says no to ambitious projects because they are afraid of drowning. The method-driven learner says yes because they know they can learn to swim. You will start raising your hand for the hard tasks. You will apply for the job you are only 60% qualified for, knowing you can close the gap in 2 weeks of deliberate practice. This confidence is the real illegal advantage. It allows you to play a bigger game than everyone else. You also gain control over your most precious resource, time. By stripping away the hours of fake productivity, you reclaim your life. You can be the person who gets top marks and still has time to go to the gym, see friends, and sleep 8 hours. You stop being a martyr to your education and start being its master. The social currency of clarity. We rarely talk about how learning speed affects relationships, but the impact is profound. When you master deep processing, you become a better listener. Most people listen superficially, waiting for their turn to speak. You have trained your brain to look for structure and meaning. When a friend tells you about their problem, you aren't just hearing words. You are building a model of their situation. You remember the details they told you 3 weeks ago because your recall engine is active. People feel truly seen and heard by you. You also become the helpful explainer. In every group project, every study hall, and every corporate team, there is a moment of confusion where everyone is looking at each other, lost. You are now the person who can step in and say, "It's actually simple. It works like this." You can translate complexity into plain English because you have practiced simplifying it for yourself. This makes you invaluable. It builds trust. It makes you a leader. Leadership is often just the ability to see the path clearly when others see fog. Your study methods have trained you to clear the fog. Furthermore, you stop viewing your peers as competition. The slow learner hoards resources because they are terrified of losing their edge. The fast learner knows that teaching others is the best way to reinforce their own knowledge. You will start inviting people into your system. You will create circles of competence where everyone grows faster. You move from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. The career chameleon. The world is changing fast. The skills that got you hired today might be obsolete in 5 years. The slow learner is terrified of this. They want the world to stand still so they don't have to go through the pain of learning again. You are immune to this fear. You are a career chameleon. If your industry shifts, you don't panic. You pivot. You treat a new software, a new regulation, or a completely new field as just another subject to be broken down and mastered. You can also engage in skill stacking. Most people have one deep skill. They are a good accountant or a good coder. You can be the accountant who also learned Python in a month. You can be the coder who also mastered public speaking. When you stack rare skills on top of each other, you become unique. You create career opportunities that didn't exist before because you are the only person who sits at the intersection of those disciplines. Adaptability is no longer a buzzword for you. It is your identity. You are the person who can walk into a chaotic environment, absorb the new rules rapidly, and start performing while others are still reading the manual. The snowball effect. Here's the best part. It gets easier. Right now, using these methods requires conscious effort. You have to remind yourself to do a brain dump. You have to force yourself to interleave. But eventually, habit automation takes over. One day, you will sit down to learn something, and you will automatically ask, "What do I already know about this?" You will automatically look for the mental model. You will automatically test yourself instead of rereading. The system will run in the background, consuming less and less cognitive energy. Your model library will also reach a tipping point. The more you know, the faster you learn. When you have thousands of mental models stored in your long-term memory, new information has infinite places to stick. You will read a book in half the time it takes others because you are just filling in small gaps in a rich existing structure, rather than building from scratch. This is the snowball effect. The rich get richer, the fast get faster. The effort you are putting in now is an investment that pays dividends for decades. The 14-day sprint. We are at the end of the theory. Now we need action. Motivation has a half-life of about 24 hours. If you close this book and do nothing, the feeling of potential will fade, and you will slide back into your old, comfortable, slow habits. You need to draw a line in the sand today. I want you to choose one real target. Pick an upcoming exam, a certification you've been putting off, or a skill you want to acquire. Do not pick something vague like get smarter. Pick something with a deadline and a metric. For the next 14 days, I want you to commit to a speed plan. Every day, before you start, do a brain dump. Every session, use the timer to create pressure. Every time you feel confused, say, "Good, this is where I upgrade." Every time you want to reread, force yourself to recall instead. Every night, plan your spaced repetition for the next day. Do this for 2 weeks. Keep a record, track your recall, track your focus, track your anxiety levels. You are looking for proof. You need to see, with your own eyes, that you can absorb more in 14 days of strategy than you used to absorb in 2 months of grinding. Once you see that proof, the old story will die. You will never be able to call yourself slow again because you will have the data to prove otherwise. The final decision. You have a choice. You can go back to the way things were. You can go back to the highlighters, the passive reading, the long hours, and the mediocre results. It is a comfortable place. It is where most people live. Or you can step across the line. You can decide that you are done playing small. You can decide that your brain is a high-performance engine that demands high-performance fuel. You can decide to embrace the difficulty, to hunt for the bottlenecks, and to build the models. This is not magic. It is not a secret code. It is simply the ruthless application of how the human brain actually works. It feels illegal because it works so well, but it is the most honest work you will ever do. Visualize your future self 1 year from now. Imagine walking into a room, a classroom, a boardroom, a stage, with the absolute certainty that whatever challenge is thrown at you, you can dismantle it, learn it, and master it. Imagine the freedom of never feeling behind again. That future is waiting for you. It is not reserved for the geniuses. It is reserved for the people who have a method. You have the method. The book is closed. The clock is running. I'm not slow, I'm upgrading, and I start now.